All right. So it's halfway down. The Mishnah on Chesed Beis. We did it yesterday a little bit, but it really from the middle there, and the Gemara today goes relatively fast. And this is really an interesting sugya here. Okay, so it says in the Mishnah, "Ein noisen nashim b'mayid." You can't get married on Chol HaMoed. Not supposed to get married. V'loy besulos, meaning we're going to be referring to not getting married. Meaning, who are we referring to? Loy besulos, when we're talking about a virgin. So the simcha with a young woman for her first time getting married. That's a great level of simcha, and we'll see in a moment that the higher the level of simcha of the chasana, the bigger of an issue it is going to be to get married on Chol HaMoed. V'loy almanas, as well as if she's a widow. V'loy miyabin, right? Yibum is the halacha when you have two brothers, one's married. Actually, whatever, you have more than one. You have at least one brother. The brother who's married dies without children. His wife is now not allowed to marry whoever she wants. The other brother, or one of the other brothers, has a chiyuv to be miyabim her, to do yibum with her, means to basically continue the marriage, or to do chalitza, which is effectively spitting in a shoe, and it sort of severs the connection, which we'll get to in two masechtas. So that halach of yibum is also a quasi marriage, right? Because it's almost like the brother's continuing the marriage of the first, but to him it's a new wife, and so that is already also called a level of simcha. And again, it obviously will depend on if you get along with your sister-in-law or not, but whatever level of simcha that is, that simcha is considered high enough that during Chol HaMoed we don't let you do it, and we'll see in the Gemara exactly why. And the Mishnah, because all of these three are to the man a tremendous simcha. So the halacha is that if a person marries a woman and then divorces her, the halacha is if he marries someone in between, well, now his previous wife becomes usher to him forever, meaning he's not allowed to marry her again. However, as long as he hasn't married anyone or been with anyone in between, if he changed his mind and says, you know what, I still love you, let's get remarried. So I think that's even a mitzvah to be machzor grushaso. But that level of simcha, although it is a mitzvah, it's a simcha shal mitzvah, it's not going to be really that great of a mitzvah of the chasana, because you're marrying the same exact woman who you were once married to. So again, the distinction in these cases is what's the level of simcha, but it's clear that if it reaches past a certain threshold of simcha, it's going to be usher to get married on Chol HaMoed, and certainly it'll be also on Yom Tov as well. We'll see in the Gemara exactly what the reason is. Zok the Mishnah weiter, a woman is allowed to put on makeup and jewelry on Chol HaMoed, meaning because it's a simcha. Meaning what we mean to say is that the method that they would use to beautify themselves would incorporate certain malachos, which normally would be usher on Chol HaMoed, but since they're doing it the simchas yantiv, it's mutter. Reb Yehuda Omer loy tasud. They shouldn't use, and they used to use this cream or this sort of face mask of some type that would basically be either it was remove hair or make the skin, whatever it was, or some sort of the point is that they put it on and right out of like Mrs. Doubtfire, they'd have all the schmutz all over the face, and it would make them look ugly. Mipnei nivel hu lost. Since in the moment when they're putting it on, they don't look good. So yeah, it will ultimately make them look good, but not on Chol HaMoed. It'll be later. The Gemara will discuss maybe what if it's a type of cream that you put on and it's a temporary problem, but in an hour she'll look good. So that's already discussion. We'll see in the Gemara. Hahedyot toifer kedarko. So here we're being the favorite distinction between a professional act versus a layperson's act. So let's say you're not a seamstress, but you have a scenario where you need to sew up something. You're allowed to sew it up, and you're allowed to sew it up what is kedarko, meaning in a normal fashion for you. You're not a professional, so what you're going to be left with is anyways not going to look that good. This is not something that's considered enough of a shinoi, the fact that you are yourself not a professional. Whereas ha'umin, if you're a seamstress, you're someone who knows how to sew. Machliv, you have to employ some type of a shinoi in order for the malacha to be mutter. Misargenes amitais, Rabbi Yehuda, we'll get to this in the Gemara. Misargenes amitais, Rabbi Yossi, Avram Mematchen. We'll explain when we get to it. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. What did it say in the Mishnah? It said you can't marry a woman on Chol HaMoed, and it listed a couple of types. However, if it's machzor grushaso, then it's going to be that's mutter. What would be the reason why you can't? For the Gemara, v'chi simcha hiloi, my have. So what? So it's a big simcha. You're telling me that when it's a great simcha, what do you mean? The simcha's yantiv. What's wrong with having simcha on yantiv? Adarabba. Yantiv is supposed to be b'chagecha. Oh, so you're saying very good. Oh, so I'm reviewing our Mashmol v'cheinim Rebbe Lazar. Amr Rebbe Ishia v'Amri La Amr Rebbe Lazar Amr Rebbe Chanina lefi she'ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. So the Gemara says a concept that we will quote this oftentimes. Ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. The only times you really hear it is usually when people are joking. They'll say a joke like, "Oh, I can't do that because it's oh, I can't go to that wedding. I can't make it to the chasana because I'm having too much of a good time doing something else. I can't be ma'arvin simcha b'simcha." But etzem, there's a halacha of ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, which literally just means you can't mix two simchas, which doesn't really sit well if you think about it, right? Meaning, if the idea is that I have a mitzvah to be b'simcha on Yontiv, so wouldn't it make sense to say that if I can find a way to artificially get happy, right? Meaning, let's be honest, ein simcha ela bebasar, ein simcha ela b'yayin. These are not real simchas. These are just ways that I can bring myself to a level of simcha. So then why not have a chasana on Yontiv? I can't think of a greater simcha than that, to be b'simcha on Yontiv. So Gemara says, ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. We'll have to understand exactly what the reason is. Rabba bar Rav Huna amar mipnei shemei simchas haregel v'oisach b'simchas ishtoi. Which is a little bit of a different argument, right? If you take a look at Rashi on ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, Rashi says, kloimar. And whenever Rashi says kloimar, the general rule is that Rashi's bothered by something, because kloimar is usually a hint that what you read in the Gemara is not to be understood exactly literally, which Rashi, of course, who is generally very committed to being literal, will oftentimes have to put the disclaimer of kloimar. Kloimar, be'inan de lismach b'simchas moed. So he understands ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha to be a yontiv halacha, which is, it's not in the words. Ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha just means you can't mix up two simchas. Meaning, if I would theoretically ask you the following question, can I have a bris on the same day as a wedding? Can I mean, any two simchas. What does it simcha mean? Does it have to be midaraisa simcha? Does it just mean happiness in general? I mean, you have to sort of work it out. Rashi's pretty clear. I think that's what the claimer in Rashi is. It doesn't say in the Gemara Yantiv. Rashi says it's referring to Yantiv. And therefore, Ein Ma'arvin Simcha V'Simcha sounds to be like you have to be noheg the Simchas Moed by itself. According to Rashi, there's really no difference between this answer of Ein Ma'arvin Simcha V'Simcha with the next answer of Mipnei Shemeniach Simchas HaRegel Simchas Ishtay, because that's also a Yantiv Halach. Other Rishonim explain that what we say Mipnei Shemeniach Simchas HaRegel Simchas Ishtay, that is of course Dafka a Chasana with a Yantiv, meaning a bris mutter on Yantiv, on Chol Hamoed, let's say.
You're not allowed to push off, it's even Deicha Shabbos.
Even Deicha Shabbos mitzad the, so the post can bring up, not, let's say not a bris, let's talk about, let's say, like Pidyon Haben, let's say. Pidyon Haben, where you have the ability to do that. Different types of simcha that come up. The bar mitzvah is another one where you sort of have flexibility with when you want to do it. Even though the post can talk about what level of simcha a bar mitzvah has, does it rise to the same level of a chasna? Does it not rise to the same level of chasna? The Pashas it doesn't. But the point is other Rishonim are very clear that this second halacha is a din in Simchas Ishtay with Yantiv, whereas the first halacha of Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha is more generic. And so, depending upon which answer you go with, there are halach nafkaminas. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Rav Yosef had the Rabbi Bar Huna the Rav, meaning this second statement that seems to be that it's specifically a halacha in a Chol Hamoed with Simchas Ishtay. That statement that he said is also the same opinion that Rav said. How do we know that you can? See how he articulates the question. Where do I know that you cannot marry a woman on Chol Hamoed? Meaning not where do I know that Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha. Where do I know you cannot? It's specifically that halacha. Shenemar, it's a pasuk. V'samachta b'chagecha b'chagecha v'loi b'ishtecha. So that comes out. We basically have two opinions. One pasuk is going to be v'samachta b'chagecha b'chagecha v'loi b'ishtecha. And what's the makor for Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha? The first opinion, that's not clear. Meaning, do they look at this drasha and say, I extrapolate from this drasha to all simachos, or does it specifically limit it to that? That's a question. We'll see in the Gemara that maybe there's a different drasha. Ula Amar Mipnei HaTorah. This is a third opinion, right? Depending, if you understand the first two opinions are two opinions, this is a third opinion. Yeah. And what would be Mipnei HaTorah? Mipnei HaTorah means there's a lot of work that goes into a chasana, and I got to prepare for the Suda, especially if it's Sheva Brachas. There's 7 days of Suda. It's a lot of work. That's a lot of involvement. Just ask the mother-in-laws, and therefore that simcha is it's going to take away from your simchas yantiv. What's that?
Not appropriate for Chol Hamoed.
Yantiv would make it easier because then you have days of Sudas that you have to prepare extra.
Oh, so that's the next answer to the Gemara, which is a reason why we answered it. I'll see in a second. Gemara says, meaning that we didn't want to allow people to get married on Chol Hamoed, because what would a smart, cheap Jew do? He would say, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to avoid having to pay extra for chas, and I'm already spending money on my Yantiv Sudas. So let me just get married, and I'll knock out two birds with one stone. Literally. What's that?
They did that in Europe.
So in Europe, what they would do is
get married on Friday. So the Suda for the chasna was Friday night.
That's the next line in the Gemara, yeah. So it's and not only that, a shaila that comes up is what about when we say is Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha specifically, let's say a Simcha Nisuin with Yantiv. What about two weddings? What if you have two sons getting married, or what if two friends just want to have they want to share the hall, so save some money. So the poskim are very clear that not only is that mutter, that it could, with siblings it could be it's an issue because that really would be for a person, especially the person making the simcha, especially for the chasanim. A chasan is having simcha at his brother's wedding, each one. But certainly for friends, or if it's something you don't know, then for sure it would be mutter. In fact, it could be it's a mitzvah. It could be it's a good thing to do. In fact, they bring from various different gedolim that their minhag was that whenever their children would get married, they would find the assignment to try to shteltsu into the same wedding, so that way they'd be able to give those people a kavadik chasana, so they shouldn't have to raise money for it, spend all that money to come to America to get taken around. You could just go ahead and shteltsu to a big gadol who has his kids getting married. But either way, bittul peer but what's the pshat? So they didn't want to allow getting married on Chol Hamoed, because if it would allow getting on Chol Hamoed, what would happen? People would hold off on getting married all year round just to save the money on the chasana. And that would mean from the time that they could have gotten married to the time that Yontif actually occurred, there's a loss of period of which is a major issue, and therefore they said it's usher. Okay, so we have four opinions. Let's say we have the two opinions of Simcha, the opinions of Tircha, and the opinions of period of So this is a brisa, right? This is the following. All of these that we just said that they're usher to get married on Chol Hamoed, they're mutter to get married on Erev Yontif. Now, what's the kasha? Kasha l'kula. Why? Because if you're getting married, especially to a basula, so the Zayin Mishta, so okay, so you figured out a way to get the chasana happening before Yontif, so you run out of the actual issues on that day, but there's still going to be 7 days of Simcha. So those 7 days of Simcha are going to be on Yontif. So Weiler, we have a problem of Ein Ma'arvin Simcha b'Simcha. So the Gemara says, Loi kasha, Lamanda Amr Mishum Simcha, according to first two opinions that it's a simcha de halacha, ikar simcha chad yoimu. So the iser of ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha is specifically the first day, and here the poskim discussed: do we mean the first day just the actual chasana, or does this also include the first day simcha, meaning the first day suda? So like, let's say you get married on a Sunday, but the suda really isn't until Sunday night, which is technically the second day. Would that already not be a problem if that second day is the first night of Yontif, right? So that's a discussion, good answers for it, but that's the poskim. Lamanda Amri Mishum Tircha. If you're going to tell me the problem is, what do you mean? 7 days of Suda is requiring a tremendous amount of Tircha? He says, no, Ikar Tircha Chad Yoyma. Really, people make themselves nuts about the first day, the Chad self, the big Suda, the first Suda. Everything after that is not that it's nothing, but it's something you can sort of work out. Leftovers, exactly right. So here's a little bit more complicated, but if the whole reason why we're delaying, we don't want to allow you to get married on Chol Hamoed is because you're going to have the entire Yontif to get married, and a person's going to push off his wedding until Yontif, until Chol Hamoed, he has 6, 7, 8 days, whatever it is, then there's going to be a bittul period of Arabia. However, meaning what? Meaning if what we're saying is you can get married the day before, so what's the suggestion? People might say that if I'm going to allow you to get married the day before, maybe people will hold off until that day, and therefore they'll use the Suda that night, right? The Suda that night, which is the Suda of their wedding, as the Suda, the same night Suda of Yontif, and they'll double up the Sudas. They don't have to worry about the cost. So on that, the Gemara is saying people aren't going to push off a chasana for the possibility of maybe grabbing one Suda that night, because what happens if someone doesn't feel well and all of a sudden you have to push it off a day? Then you're done. Then it's on Yontif and you can't do it. So everything Gemara says that that's not a concern. But it comes out of halach l'mais. What we're effectively saying is that you can get married the day before, and it seems you can use the Shivas Yemei HaMishta, you can sort of that up with the Sudas you would have on Yontif, and there wouldn't be a problem with Ein Ma'arvin Simcha b'Simcha. It's not clear how we paskin in Ein Ma'arvin Simcha b'Simcha. We quote all the time. It's a phraseology of Ein Ma'arvin Simcha b'Simcha. But depending upon these two Lashonis in the Gemara, it's not clear if the halacha is specifically limited. If paskin Ein Ma'arvin Simcha b'Simcha, it'll mean even not Yontif. It'll mean other things also. Whereas if you paskin specifically the Shita in the Gemara that holds that it's a din in v'samachta b'chagecha v'loy be'ishlecha, then you could do a million things simcha together. It specifically be limited to a chasana and to a yontif. Continues the Gemara. Where do we know that, man? This is specifically coming on to the first opinion, right? We have a drush of a samachta b'chagecha, and the other two svaras seem to be midarabanan. It's another interesting hara here, which would be that the third and fourth opinions seem to be a svara, meaning we're not mevatel period of Arabia, or it's too much tircha. Whereas the first answer and the second answer, it seems or at least the second answer was a drasha. The first answer we don't know, but now the Gemara is going to bring from a pasuk, so we'll have to see. Does the Gemara mean to say that this is not Torah the case, or this is only midrabanan? So asking Gemara, no, the pasuk is in Melachim, and what it's talking about is it's talking about Shlomo HaMelech and the Chanukas HaBayis when we finished building the Beis HaMikdash, first Beis HaMikdash, and we had a Chanukas HaBayis. So what does it say in the pasuk? If I butcher the words, you'll point it out. V'yashloim be'eso hi es hachag. This is referring to the Chag of the Chanukas HaBayis. V'chol Yisrael imay kahal gadol milavoi chamos ad nachal mitzrayim lifnei Hashem Elokeinu shivas yomim. So the Chag of the Chanukas HaBayis was 7 days. The shivas yomim, what's that second 7 days? That's referring to the Yontiv of Sukkot, because that's when it was occurring. Arba asar yom. So a person learning Tanakh would already have a lot of things here. First of all, I can't do the math. You said 7 days and 7 days. I see that it's 14. You got to that it's 14, so the Gemara's going to let me know about that in a minute. Oh, that's the major issue. So what do you have over here? You have the 7 days of Simchas Samachta of the Bayis was happening in the 7 days leading up to Sukkot, which include Yom Kippur, which means they ate on Yom Kippur, right? So that's the drasha, right? But let's just first see the drasha. If it would be true, and this is the cheshbon, you have to work it out. If it were to be true that I could take one simcha and have it on the time of another, which we're going to understand to mean a chasana yontiv, right? Because here this isn't a chasana. What simcha is this? This is a simcha of simchas, unless you want to say some musarvar that like the Chanukas HaBayis is like getting married. I mean, the Pashas is not what it's talking about. The Pashas is it's talking about the simchas HaMishkan, simchas HaBeis HaMikdash. So here clearly you see that if you hold ein marv and simcha v'simcha, it's going to be expanded beyond just the chasana. If it were to be true that you can have two simcha on the same day, why did Shlomo HaMelech separate it out into 7 days followed by another 7 days? You should have just combined the 7 with the 7. Use the same 7 days for both. Now the question is why? Meaning he did it 14 days. There's no riot from the fact that it was 7 days here. I mean, if he finished on the first of the month, 7 days later is going to be the end of the first week, and then the 7 days after that are going to be the week, whatever. If you finish on the 7th, meaning what's the raya that you hold ein ma'arvin simcha with simcha, because it happened to be there were 14 days. So Tosas and Rashi over here speak out a little bit different ways of saying it, but Tosas over here on the top, Tosas little line here, meaning that there's a tzorach, and here already you're seeing sort of arguments that had there not been a halacha of ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, there's an argument to be made that if Shlomo HaMelech had a choice of when to celebrate the simchas Chanukas HaBayis, it would have made sense to just push it into the yontiv where they're taking off from work. But since do that it was because he had a competing argument in his mind of why we can't do that. It must be because he holds ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. That's how the Gemara is speaking it out according to Tosfos. In which case, you'd have a raya, the vein marvin simcha b'simcha, and then weiter, what it would mean is even a non-achasana, meaning even just regular smachos. Ask the Gemara, but still, vidilma mintar loy natrin, and maybe the halacha is we normally say ma'arvin, but vehechad the isrami avdina. But if maybe you don't have a raya from Shlomo HaMelech. Why? Because maybe, like I just said before, maybe it just worked out that that's the way it worked. That he finished when finished, then there's the 7 days of simcha for that, and then when he picked up the next 7 days, those 7 days happen to be the next 7 days of Sukkot. But really, ein chanami, had it worked out that it would have taken them 2 or 3 days more to build the bias, then they would have had the 7 days go in, and he would have done it. But you have no raya from the fact that he didn't do it, that it's because of ein marvin simcha b'simcha. Gemara says no. Ibayale l'shiurei porta, right? Meaning he should have left over a little bit. Meaning if the halacha would be that ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. Sorry, if the halacha would be ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, then what we would say is that even though it worked out that the 7 days were then followed by the other 7 days, he should have taken something of the binyan into yontif, meaning whatever, a small portion. Why? Because again, the same story from Taisvus of Kadesh Batlu Yisrael Mimalachtan Kolkach, we would have tried to reduce as much as possible how much time they're taking off, even if it's not the entire 7 days, take off a little bit. So the Gemara says no. If you're talking about the building of the Beis HaMikdash, delaying completing it is a major problem. He says, Shiur binyan beis hamikdash loy mishayrinon. We don't do that. We want the beis hamikdash to be created. Right? So obviously we're not going to delay once you actually are holding by building it. We want to rush that process as much as possible. So therefore, there's no raya. So here you have to sort of just know the structure of the heichal, right? So the and not that I have an exact picture of it, but the understanding is that the roof was it came up to a point of a space where there was an amma, according to certain Rishonim, and that amma was covered with a certain type of either iron or brass or some type of metal, where it was set up in such a way where it would prevent the birds from being able to hang out up there. It would sort of be a bazillion to the arvim just hanging out up there. So therefore, they did it in such a way where it made it impossible or very uncomfortable for the birds to want to sit up there. The specific mitzias, I'm not 100% sure, but it's nails sticking out of the top. Yeah, thank you. Right. So and the nails were an amma, very big nails, and basically like if you're a skateboarder, you know how like they'll pour or they'll put something along the they don't want you messing up with so they didn't want to have the birds up there. So what happened was, this really is not something that is like mi'ikr haguf habayis. It's more just like a practical matter. We didn't want to have it. It's a bizayon to the Beis Hamikdash, so therefore, but that was something that he could have pushed in, meaning it wouldn't have risen to the level of being part of the bias that delaying it would have been a problem. But it's enough part of the binyan habayis that by pushing it into Yantav, we could say from there that you see the reason why he didn't do that. It must be because Ema Arvin Simcha B'Simcha, which is an unbelievable thing if you stop and think about it. What we're effectively saying is this architectural adjustment would have been enough of a raya of that you can be Ma'arav Simcha B'Simcha if we would have pushed it even in just slightly. Either way, the fact that they didn't do that, the Gemara wants to say, I have a raya from the pasuk that you hold Ema Arvin Simcha B'Simcha. The Gemara says, no, Amma Kalya Oyriv, Tzarich Binyan Habayis. He says, no, even that is considered part of the Binyan Habayis, and therefore you have no raya for the fact that he didn't do it. Ella Demis. So then the Gemara says, fine, you're right. So I don't have a raya from the fact that he didn't delay, and I can't bring it from the Maisa itself, but maybe from the pasuk itself I could bring a raya. Ella mi dimiyaser kra, from the fact that the Torah, the psukim are too wordy. I can make a diak to this halacha. Michti. Ksiv arba asar yom. It says 14 days. Shivas yom lamali. What do I need to tell me the 7 and the 7, or why it says 7 and 7 when I need the 14? Whichever way you go, I have an extra pasuk here. So Shema mina hani lachud b'hani lachud. So I find it very interesting. The Gemara is, in the end of the day, coming out that it's just from Yitur Hakra. The extra pasuk tells me that it must be Eim Arvin Simcha B'Simcha. But it didn't want to do that, it seems. It seems it really wanted to work it out from really what amounted very, in my opinion, dachuk cheshvan. Meaning, what were we going to say? I can bring a raya of Eim Arvin Simcha B'Simcha from the fact that there was like a portion of the roof that was hanging over, or there were these pegs sticking out or nails sticking out. That'll be a raya Eim Arvin Simcha B'Simcha. Very difficult to say that that's going to really be an ear of simcha, especially when you have a very glaring, obvious issue in the pasuk itself. So it's clear that the Gemara wanted to. I mean, I would conclude from here that it makes more sense to try to bring a raya from the mitzias of the story than it would be from a drasha. I mean, not that a drasha is not strong, but you could find it in the story itself. It's always a lot more. Maybe not necessarily stronger in halacha, but I think it sits well, especially if what we're discussing here is an asmachta, right? Because this is bepashtus an asmachta. At this point, we're not really.
Particularly a drasha and say from malachim, you can't make drashas at level as say from the Ikrim.
Yeah, and especially if you think about it from the standpoint of, I mean, listen, oftentimes we've discussed it many times. Oftentimes the Gemara will know the ultimate makar for a halacha, but it wants to flesh out other things, so it will go down what we'll call a tangent, what we would call a tangent, on purpose in order for it to flesh out agav other things. But okay, fine. That is the discussion of Ein Arvin Simcha Bis Simcha. Amar Pranach, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Oisoi Shana. So now let's get back to the discussion of what actually happened at that time. Oso Shana, that year of the Chanukah Sabayas, Loi Oso Yisrael Es Yom Kippur. They didn't do Yom Kippur. Meaning, what does that mean? They didn't do Yom Kippur. No slicha, no kapara. I mean, this is like, can you imagine Yom Kippur comes and it's like, can I come to you for a Suda? Like, I mean, that's making Kiddush on Yom Kippur. They ate. They were b'simcha. Lo osu Yisrael es Yom Kippurim v'hayu dayagim v'oimrim sheman nischayvu seinein shel Yisrael kalel. And they were very nervous that they were doing Yom Kippur the wrong way, so to speak, by eating on Yom Kippur. They were nervous that this was going to be our downfall. Meaning, on the one hand, you just imagine, just put yourself in their mindset. They're in Eretz Yisrael at that point, close to 500 years, right? More or less. They had the Mishkan all through the Midbar. They've had Yom Kippur for the last 550 years or so. And all of a sudden, Shlomo HaMelech is building a temple, and he says, I mean, just imagine, new shul, and in celebration of the new shul, you can eat on Yom Kippur. I mean, it's insane, right? I mean, just imagine a rabbi would do it now. He would get a big flock of people, I think, in the shul pretty quickly, right? So, I mean, this rabbi is cool. He knows how to.
I mean, if he does that, why do we even think that he might have followed this concept of
Well, I'm going to make sure I understand your question. You're asking if he did this.
Why do we even think that he thought about the 7 days and days?
I mean, do you mean to say that he clearly understood these 7 days of Simcha are so strong that he didn't? I'm saying
he didn't think Yom Kippur was strong, right? In his own, I mean.
Okay.
Even that he let's eat, but then why would he follow?
So is your question that Yom Kippur also has Simcha, and therefore he's combining the Simcha of the Chanukah Tzabayis with Yom Kippur? Is that?
Yeah,
okay, so that's a very good question. There's a discussion: is there even a mitzvah Simcha on Yom Kippur? By the way, for Rosh Hashanah, that's not clear. Meaning, although we generally celebrate, let's say Rosh Hashanah, it's a little bit of an easier one. Do we say that the Simcha of Kapara on Yom Kippur is called the Simcha that we mean here, or does it specifically mean the Simchas Yontif? Right, it'll depend on the drasha. If it's coming v'samachta b'chagecha, there's no v'samachta b'chagecha on Yom Kippur. That's for sure. There's no v'samachta b'chagecha b'pashtos even on Rosh Hashanah.
Even on Shabbos.
Shabbos, there's only din Oineg, right?
This doesn't count as Simcha.
Exactly.
Different thing.
If we're talking about Simcha mitzad, generic Simcha, what we mean to say is happy, joy, right? So then there's joy on Yom Kippur. There's joy. Then you could start talking about brises and Sheva brachas, all of the siyum mesechta that comes up a lot. Also, are you allowed to make a siyum on Chalamayid? There's the din of Yontiv. Chalamayid is smachta b'chagecha. I have the simcha finishing a mesechta. Of course, yeah, for sure, absolutely. But do you make the siyum? You can always finish. I mean, So either way, it's a very interesting discussion. Just in general, which components in the equation of ein ma'arv and simcha v'simcha do we apply? Which ones don't we apply? But it's clear from here that the fact that it happened on Yom Kippur and he was b'simcha on Yom Kippur, that he had no problem doing that. You're asking, I think, a good question, which is, if there's a din simcha on Yom Kippur, maybe not samachta v'chagecha simcha, but the simchas kapara, whatever you want to call it, well, then how was he allowed to do this? Obviously, he ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. So that's a good question. I don't have a good answer for that, unless you'll say, of course, that simcha on Yom Kippur must be held like the v'samachta v'chagecha drasha and not like ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, which could very well be the case. Either way, so what does the Gemara say? They were nervous that maybe that they're going to be killed over this because they were eating on Yom Kippur. So Israel is always, what's the English word for euphemism? Thank you very much. When I'm in Maramot, something like my vocabulary just doesn't. I find myself struggling to use. So there you go. Yeah, 100%. So Nan Shal Yisrael Kalel. So Yatsa Baskail the Amr Lahem. They said, don't worry. So we obviously don't mean that the Baskol came out and told them halacha, because we know that we don't listen to Baskol when it comes to halacha. But here, to just assure them of their future, was very interesting. Meaning they were What exactly is the reason for the Baskol? Meaning they were nervous that the fact that they ate meant that they were going to be destroyed. Okay, I mean that's bad. The Baskol is doing what exactly? It's just like a chesed from Hashem. Don't worry, be happy. Literally, like that's what they're saying. Yeah, okay. My dorish. How do you see what I just said in Psukim? Amru kal v'chaymer, meaning my dorish that they were comfortable doing what they did. Right. So it's a little bit of a complication here. On the one hand, we're going to now kal v'chaymer that was svara behind why they went ahead and ate on Yom Kippur. But then we're going to see that maybe there's a pasuk also. So we'll see. My draish, Amru kal v'chaymer, they said as following: Ma mishkan she'ein kedushaso kedushaso olam. The mishkan was a temporary abode for Hashem. The carbon yachid doicha Shabbos de'eser skila, and yet a carbon yachid that was brought up in the mishkan while they were in the midbar or up until that point in time in Eretz Yisrael. And by the way, also once they were in Eretz Yisrael, there was a halacha that you can even have bamais, which we discussed in the previous Masechta, right? Personal altars in your backyard, we discussed, right? And that was despite the fact that you'd be allowed to bring a carbon on Shabbos. So again, combining all of those things, you're dealing with a kedusha that's temporary. You're dealing with a kedusha that's lighter, right? Because you could bring bamos. You're dealing with Shabbos, which is a chiyuv ski, which is more chamer, and you say you could bring a carbon. So if that's the case, that Mevatel Shabbos for this carbon, which was brought up in a lower level Kedushas Mishkan, Mikdash, based on Mikdash, which is what? The Kedushas Olam, and again, you have to work that out. Kitchel Shaita, Kitchel Asad Lave, Kitchel Shaita, like Kitchel Asad Lave, but whatever it is, the Kedushas Olam, it's certainly a higher madriga than the Mishkan, the carbon Sibur, and it's a higher level carbon, the Yom Kippurim, the Anush Karas, which is a lighter punishment. Lokal Shekain. So what are we discussing over here? You're telling me that I shouldn't be besimcha? The Gemara says, so Avad is a good kal v'chaymer. But the Gemara, so if that's good, elamai how you doing him? So what were they so nervous about if you're telling me such a good cheshbon? He says, no, because hasam tzarich gevaya. Meaning maybe you can make a pircha, maybe the kal v'chaymer is not so strong, because maybe, although in cheshbon it makes sense, but over there you're talking about being matir a carbon, to bring it up to Hashem. There was no simcha for themselves. Maybe when there's a selfish cheshbon a selfish part of the cheshbon, it doesn't work. Therefore, they might think that there's a problem with the kal v'chaymer, so they didn't feel so comfortable. But in the end of the day, the kal v'chaymer is strong, so the Baskel came out to help them out. Hachanami mi aved li avdu mechaloi nichlu v'loi lishtu. Ask the Gemara, I don't understand. The kal v'chaymer just says you could do avodah. Who says it was a right to go ahead and eat and drink? So Gemara says, "Ein simcha b'lo yachilu u'shtiyah." Gemara says, "No. What do you mean? Once you're telling me simcha, you can't be bringing karbonos without following it up with, which is a politic thing. I mean, if you really think about it, it's a very interesting lesson, right? Yes, bring a carbon. It's very unless you're talking about an oila, but I'm saying bringing a carbon is a very important thing. But the simcha of bringing the carbon is followed up with achila v'shtiyah. And if you don't have the achila v'shtiyah after shul, there's a little shul not so geschmack. Like the simcha you have of davening is very important. The simcha you have of avodah, but if you can't make that a physical simcha, it takes it away from it, and therefore that's going to be mutter. For the Gemara, mishkan dedachi Shabbos minalan, and how do we know that the carbon that was brought in the mishkan could be doicha Shabbos? If you're going to tell me it's from the fact that, and we're talking here, by the way, not the carbon of the mishkan bechlal that would happen on Shabbos. We're talking about the simcha of the Chanukas HaMishkan that was done in the Midbar, right? So from that, we learned over there that the karbonos they brought could be even brought on Shabbos. And if you're going to tell me the reason, the makar for that was from the fact that it says in the pasuk b'yayim harishan u b'yayim hashvi, which implies the seventh day, which is Shabbos, that they were bringing the karbonos. This is no dilma shvila karbonos. Maybe it doesn't mean Shabbos. Maybe it just means the seventh day of the times you bring a carbon, which would have meant Sunday, right? Maybe they just skipped Shabbos. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar Kra. No, the pasuk says on the 11th day, b'yoyim astei asar. So, which is the 11th day. What does it say? It says b'yoyim astei asar yoyim. So there's a little bit of a yitur in the Kra of yoyim and yoyim. Ma yoyim kulei ratzuf. Just like a day, it's 24 hours are continuous with no breaks. Af ashtei asar kulam netzuf. And so too, the 11 prior days were Ritzufin, and therefore it included Shabbos, and therefore they were bringing a carbon on Shabbos. Maybe it just means the 11 days minus the days you can't bring karbanos, which would have been Shabbos. On that, the Gemara says no. Ksiv kra achrina. There's a second pasuk, which is the pasuk by the 12th day, where it says v'yom shnei masar yom. So there's an extra yom. Same drasha ma yom ratzaf af shnayim es shnei masar yom kulam Ritzufin. Gemara says 1 second. You didn't really help me. It's the same drasha. Gemara says no. The dilma hachanami yomim haruyin. Maybe it also over there excludes Shabbos. Imkain shrei kra lamali. So you're right. If all I would have is 1 by 11 or 1 by 12, I would maybe say it doesn't include Shabbos. But if you're going to do it twice, it must be from the extra. Must be telling me that it even includes Shabbos, and so therefore I see they were allowed to bring karbonos on Shabbos, and now you have a kal v'chaymer to the simchas Chanukas Habayis by Shlomo HaMelech that would now say that you shouldn't eat on Yom Kippur, and that cheshbon was a good cheshbon. Okay, fine. Meaning, okay, very nice. We see that they did this. They made a kal v'chaymer. So I don't understand this question. What do you mean? What is this question asking? What do you mean? They made a kal v'chaymer. Yeah. It's a great kal v'chaymer. Maybe what the Gemara means to say is they made a kal v'chaymer, but they were nervous What were they nervous about? Because they had a pircha on their kal v'chaymer. What was the pircha? The pircha was maybe you can't go from tzarich gavaya to tzarich hedyet. Maybe you can't say, okay, I can bring a carbon, but who says I got a right to eat? Meaning there seems to be some level of pircha kal v'chaymer. So the Gemara is saying, but it is still strange. It's not like it would have made a little bit more sense if what I'm saying is true for the Gemara to follow it up immediately from there when it says mat. When it shot up the kal v'chaymer, it should have said, okay, what's the pasuk? It then jumped to something else, and now it's coming back to this. It's a little bit of a difficult point here. I'm not very clear. I didn't see anything. I didn't see it addressed by any Rishonim, but I also didn't have a chance to look it through. Okay, fine. On how do we know that what they did was okay?
Maybe this question is not what they did in this episode, but how do we know that Mikdash, Korbanos, Yom Kippur is dofe?
So that I think we already know. I mean, that's clear from the Yom itself. I mean, the fact that we bring Korbanos and Yom Kippur. I mean, that's that. And the question here uminalan that the simcha is like the what was it, the Nisim? I mean, unless you'll say that it's a drasha lasud lavai, we have a third Beis Hamikdash. Maybe you'll say, but again, why would we need it? Why can't we just make the same kal v'chaymer then that we now? So that's not very clear. And who says that the Beis Hamikdash is even coming during where it's going to be Negeh Yom Kippur, meaning, right? But if it's Nisan, Asid, and Ligoil, then it's certainly not going to be, although there are ways around that. Either way, let's address the question for what it is. I like to understand it as the kal v'chaymer wasn't so strong, and so therefore the Gemara is coming onto a drasha, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Well,
Maybe it's how do we know they ate? How do we know they didn't in that episode? It doesn't clearly say.
Okay. Well, Mikdash, okay, could be. Maybe. If you want to just tell me that it's from the fact that it says 14 days, we have the same kasha we had before, which is maybe it just means 14 days minus the days you're not allowed to eat. So Gemara says, no, you're right. Gemara Yom, we learn it's a drasha. Once you tell me Yom over here, our boss are Yom by the Chanukah's Abayis, and it says Yom by the Nisim of the Mishkan in the Midbar. And over there, we just spent a little bit of time explaining how there was a Yitur in the Cross, 11th and 12th day, that it told me that it included Shabbos. So just like it included it over there, it was Ritzufim, so to over here it includes Ritzufim, which tells me that they even ate on Yom Kippur. Again, it's a little bit of a difficult. What do you mean? If I have a pasuk and I have a kal v'chaymer, and the lashon of achilahu is also a very difficult lashon in the Gemara. Achilahu means, how do we know that Hashem forgave them? Forgave them for what? They didn't do anything wrong. So not so clear. This is mitzad the tuma, meaning halacha is, like we know, like by treifah, let's say, by eating tarfus, right? So the halacha is you might have had to eat it, but this doesn't mean that the pig just became kosher. So there's a timtum alev, there's all these different discussions of, but here, I mean, if there's a heter, let me ask you a question. Halacha l'maaseh, if you have a heter to eat on Yom Kippur, you make a bracha? Of course. Not even a shiloh, right? Do you make? Of course. It's pashut. You don't just take food. You eat. Yeah, it's yontif. Yeah. I mean, let me state that again. I don't know if you would call it a yontif of simchas yontif, but you can't eat without making kiddush. You have to have kiddush. I mean, I don't know what the matpeh of kiddush is. I'm sure it's not in the siddur, but whatever it would be, you'd have to figure it out. But what were you going to say?
They kind of had a problem with their own kal v'chomer, and these drushes are not so strong.
Yeah.
So we're saying, is there a strong reason to believe that what they did was forgiven? Like is there another source?
Right. Yeah, I hear. I'm just pointing out that it seems like the Gemara. Listen, there are some Gemaras you have 4 words, and the Rishonim wrap around, and they put so much into those 4 words. And here you seem like we seem to be rehashing the same question 3 different ways. I'm not saying it's a problem. It's just, it's again, we're sort of, I wouldn't say it's a garat. I mean, it's relevant to halacha, maybe not so much nowadays, but okay. So what's the drasha? How do we know that they were forgiven? The Tani Tachlifa learned the following. Yeah, that's. I mean, if what they were doing was allowed, not only allowed, but maybe even a mitzvah, forgiven for what? I mean, really, maybe forgive. I mean, I don't know. Not clear. It's a long pasuk here. Pasuk says, "B'yom hashmini shalach ha'am v'yibarchu es hamelech v'yechol aleim smeichim v'tuvei lev al kol hatov asher asa Hashem leDavid avdoi u'Yisrael amai." Okay, so let's just work out this pasuk. What does the pasuk say? It says on the 8th day, B'yom hashmini, Sholach esa'am, he sent the nation. V'yevorchu esamelech, and the king, Shlomo HaMelech, blessed the nation. V'yelchu, and they went la'ahaleim to their tents. Smeichim, happy, v'tuvei leif, heart gladdened, whatever. Al kol hatova asher osa Hashem, on all of the great things that were done by Hashem. Lid David for David, Avdai his servant, Uli Yisrael Amoyin for the nation. Yeah. So we have to work it out. What is exactly going on in this pasuk? And just let's remember context. Shlomo HaMelech was the son of David, right? So David was the king before Shlomo HaMelech. The Beis HaMikdash was not built by David, but rather built by his son, Shlomo HaMelech. Although, just for some context, it's not the pshat that it wasn't going to be built by David. It's just the Gemara says that it was because David HaMelech spilt blood in Milchama that Hashem didn't want to have the bias, the Beis HaMikdash being built by someone who had spilt blood. But chutz from that, he would have been very much roy to build the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, it was done in the times of his son, who didn't have to wage war in the same manner. And so therefore, since he didn't have any blood on his hands in that sense, now one might incorrectly conclude that the reason why David HaMelech wasn't so to build the Beis HaMikdash was because of the chet. Let me say chet. Let me take that back. Because of the perception of chet by Bathsheba, right? What happened by Bathsheba? Bathsheba was married to a fellow named Uriah. Uriah was a soldier, or at least he was made a soldier, to go out to the front lines, and it turned out that Uriah died, and then David HaMelech was with his wife. Now the problem was that it was not clear if he died, but the minhag back in those days was that whenever go out to war, in order to prevent their wives from being stuck as an aguna, they would give them a conditional get, and they would say, if I make it back, then this get's just a piece of paper, but if I don't make it back, then this get is a get, right? So therefore, if a person's declared as we not coming back from the war, then the halacha is she's now mutter. So really, David HaMelech didn't do anything wrong. Although there were those who argued that what he did was something wrong, and there were those who complained that the reason why David HaMelech wasn't able to build the Beis HaMikdash in his own name, but rather it had to go through Shlomo HaMelech, was, and these are his oivim, these were his enemies, were saying about him, was because he was chote. This is a backdrop to what we're about to read. So the pasuk says that Ubeyom Hashmini, on the 8th day, Shlomo HaMelech sent the nation home, right? And they all blessed the king. Everyone went to their home happy. And on the Tova, Asher Asa Hashem le David Avdai Uli Yisrael Amon. So Zak the Gemara, Le'ahaleim, what's that referring to? Shaholchu u'matzu n'sheim b'tahara. They went home and found their wives were not tamei nida, and they were not usher to them. Smeichim shen, meaning why? Because of, like I said before, that there wasn't an issue with, let's say the wife would be with a man, and then she wouldn't have been with a man unless the husband didn't come back. But if he didn't come back, then he would be with another man. The point basically is that nothing occurred while they were gone, and when they got home, their wives would have been usher to them for any reason. Smeichim shenenu miziv ashchina, fine. Betuvei leiv shekol echad ve'echad nisabra ishlei b'char al kol hatova. And here's the punchline for us: sheyatza baskol v'amr lahem kulchem mizumanim l'chayo lamaba. This is where we have in the pasuk that they were forgiven. Now it's interesting over here. We're bringing a pasuk, so it's not really so much that the pasuk is a makar, and this is, I guess, what the Gemara's answer is it's that how do we know that they even heard a baskol? And on that, the pasuk tells us that they heard a baskol. So that'll be the answer to that question. Okay, once we're bringing the pasuk, let's just try to understand what's going on in that pasuk. David Avdu Yisrael Amay Bishlama, Yisrael Amay. It's like we just explained. The Achalahu Avan Yom Kippurim, because they ate in Yom Kippur, and you see that they were given forgiveness for that. Elul David Avdu Mahi. What exactly was it? Great thing that Hashem did for David HaMelech. Amar Yehuda Merav. When it came time to bring the aron with the luchais in it, wanted to bring it inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. What happened? The gates to open into the Heichal, to get into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, were closed. And he couldn't get it in. And he davened 24 Mizmayrei Tehillim B'Pashtas that are all different forms of tefillah to try to open them up. And he wasn't answered. What we say on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, he tried to open up the gates by saying that. That didn't work either. However, Kivin Sha'amar, once he got to the pasuk, a part of his tefillah of Divrei Hayom says, Hashem Elokim, Al Tasha Pnei Meshichecha, Zachal Chazdei David Avdech. He mentioned his father. Don't forget the chasadim of my father David, who is your servant, Miyad Nena. And Ba'oso Shah, it was in that moment when Hashem allowed the sha'arim of the Heichal to open up, and it was only in the schus of David HaMelech that it happened, that all of the enemies of David HaMelech who were claiming that because of the Maisa of Bathsheba was the reason why he wasn't zoich to have the Beis Hamikdash built on his hands, but through his schus, they were now proven to be incorrect. V'yadav hakol shemach la'kadosh baruch hu also oven of Bathsheba. Fine. Rabbi Yomi ben Amsoy, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, very chashuv people. We'll see in a minute why. Tanu parshas Nedarim by Shimon by Yochai. They were learning by Shimon by Yochai. They were learning sugis Nedarim. Nitzasham will get there soon. Iftar minei ba'orta, and they left at night. They left him at night. L'tzafra, however, in the morning, hadar bekom iftar minei. They came back and said Shalom Aleichem, but we're leaving. Meaning they were leaving at night. They said goodbye, or they asked permission to leave. He said go home. They left, but instead of leaving, they ended up staying that night again. And then in the morning, they came back and said after Shachris, they said, all right, we're leaving. And he said to them, if there is mini ba'orta, what do you come back to me over here to say goodbye? You already said goodbye last night. Amrulay limdetenu rabbeinu. What do you mean? Did you not teach us, Rabbi? Talmud sheniftami Rabbi. If a Talmud is leaving his Rebbe, vilon ba'osayir, but he ends up staying over the night in that city, tzarich limiftami menu b'hamacheres. He's got to come back. It's a kavod atayir. It's a kavod Rav. Go back and say goodbye again later. Shenemar, like the pasuk says, b'yom hashmini sholach esa'am v'yafarch v'esamelech. And let's just figure out what was the date. If we're talking about the 8th day from the beginning of Sukkot, right? So what day was it? So Sukkot starts on the 15th. So 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 was the 22nd of Tishrei. If it was the 22nd of Tishrei, look what the pasuk says next. Pasuk is also, I think, in Divrei Yomim. Yeah. Ubayom esrim mishlosha lechodesh. So that is the 23rd day. The following day, what does it say? Lechodesh hashvi sholach hasa'am. So which one is it? Was it that on the 22nd day, b'yom hashmini sholach hasa'am, or was it sholach hasa'am on the 23rd? So you see, he was sholach hasa'am twice. Must be they stayed that night, and therefore you see Ella mikan tal tamad aniftam rabbi v'lon ba'isayir tzarich lemiftar mimenu pam acheres. Meaning this is a question, so that's why we came back to you in the morning. Amar le'lebrei. So the Shimon Bar Yochai said to his son, and we know who his son was, Bnei Adam halalu anashim shel tzurahim. These are very chashuv a mention who were just here doing this thing. They understand a lot. They're big Talmidei Chachamim. Zil gebehu delivruchuch. Go to them. They'll give you brachas. Azul ishkechinu de karami kroyadodi. So his son went to go get brachas from these chashuv tanoim. And Rashi brings over here, or the Mefarshim bring that Gerim, at least, was from Gerim, meaning little Amari Stanemeyer over here in the Gemara. What do you call it? The Darshanim Psukim over here. So he went to get a bracha from them. What does it say? Ksiv, the pasuk says, Paleis ma'agal raglecha v'kol derachecha yikoinu. And then all the pasuk says, Uksiv oirech chayim peinti pales, which I'm not going to touch it word for word. We'll read Rashi to tell us what the psukim mean. Rashi says, last three Rashis. Last three Rashis. Peles ma'agal raglech. Rashi says, Kloimar, shkoil mitzvahs, meaning you should make a shikol hadas, evaluate the mitzvahs. Va'ayin behen ezei mitzvah gedola va'asei hagdola. Meaning if you have two mitzvahs in front of you, a big one and a small one, do a big one. However, the next pasuk says, a different pasuk, says oirechayim pentapalas the mashma kol mitzvah shetava liyadcha asay osa ben gdola ben katana, meaning don't be choosing big mitzvahs over small mitzvahs over big mitzvahs, but rather do whatever comes to your hand. So which one is it? This was the stira they were themselves trying to figure out, and they said, and this was the son of Shimon Bar Yochai was just observing this entire dialogue. Like kasha kam mitzvah when it's a mitzvah that can be done ayidei acherim, then you should just do the bigger one because it's going to get done either way. But if it's going to be kam mitzvah where now not everyone's going to be for sure doing a mitzvah, maybe one of the mitzvahs won't get done. So whichever mitzvah comes to you first, that's the one you should do because there's a possibility you'll lose out. You only get a choice of picking the more chash of a mitzvah when you know for sure that all the mitzvahs are going to be done. Before Hadar Yasvi, meaning before they even had a chance to figure out what was going on, they had another stira that they were asking each other before they even realized that Shimon Bar Yochai's son was standing there.
Like a mace mitzvah, you just have to do it, even if you're learning. It has nothing to do.
Yeah. And some Mefarshim actually explain the Gemara is talking about bittul Torah for the mitzvahs. I'm explaining more as a choice of you have, but yeah, different Mefarshim go through it different ways. Hadar Yasvi v'kam yiboilu. They had another question, meaning they themselves were discussing this. Ksiv, the pasuk says, Yikarahi mipninim v'chol chafetzecha lo yeshvu ba, referring to Torah. That Torah is so chashiv, it's more valuable than pearls, and all your chafatzim, all your desires, lo yeshvu ba, will never equal its satisfaction. Let's say ha cheftzei shemayim yishvula, but that's mashma only your chafatzim, not cheftzei shemayim. So the diuk over there is that for cheftzei shemayim, it will. Meaning what? Meaning when it comes to being mevatel Torah to go do mitzvahs, you should be mevatel Torah to go do mitzvahs. Uksiv, however, the other pasuk says kol chafatzim milo yishvu ba, and over there it doesn't say chafatzecha, it says chafatzim, which is mashma all chafetzim, which means all desires, even dafilu cheftzei shemayim lo yishvu ba. So which one is it? Gemara answers the same thing. They answered kam b'mitzvah she'esh la'asosei de'acherim. When it's a mitzvah, you could do al yidei, and therefore the mitzvahs are going to get either way. You shouldn't get up and be mevatel it. Whereas if it's come in mitzvah sheyesh l'asosei de'achim, this is where we have the halacha, although it's come up in Tainus and other places about being mevatel Torah for a chassan, mevatel Torah for basically doing mitzvahs, mace mitzvah, whatever it is. Fine. So these were the two steers they asked, and Shimon Chai's son is just sitting there waiting. Okay, no, very nice. My father told me to come get a bracha. I'm here. Amrulay, they said to him, they saw him standing there. They picked their heads up from their drushes and they said, "My boy, what are you doing here? We were just by you. We were just by you. You followed us all the way back over here. What are you doing over here?" Amr lahu, no. The Amrli Abazil Gabayo delivrechuch. My father he couldn't even say I came for a bracha. My father said I got to come get a bracha, so I'm here getting a bracha. Amrulay, they said to him, okay, let me give you a bracha. When you hear the bracha, you're gonna be like, "Aye, Yehei Rava, let it be the will of God. The tizra that you shall plant v'lo sechtzad and you shall not harvest. Ta'ayil you shall," and here you can just really pronounce how you want. You shall ta'ayil v'lo tepuk, you shall do effort and it won't come to fruition, or tepuk, you shall order something v'lo ta'ayil and it won't come. Meaning either the first one is you should be zochet to let's say you should be zochet to order to buy something and not get it delivered, and the second what you get delivered shall not be something you want, whatever it is. The point is they're giving him a bracha that it seems kolol in the bracha is a klala, right? Continues the bracha, so-called bracha. Lichruv beischa, your house should be destroyed. V'leisuv ushpischa, and the guests of your home shall all return, meaning leave. They should all leave, or maybe they should return to your house, whatever it is. Levalbel pisurcha, your table shall be bilbul. It should have like chaos. You should have chaos at your table, whatever that means. V'loisechsi shasachadata, you shouldn't see another year. This is the bracha, right? So Shimon Yochai sends his son, go get bracha. These chashva mentioned, he go gets a bracha, and this is the bracha he gets. And we'll see in a moment, this is a very chashva bracha. Ki asa lagabe avua, when he came back, he said to his father, Amalei loy mibayad de bruchi le bachinan. Not only did they not give me a bracha, aval tzeuri tzeuran, meaning obviously they weren't really giving him a klala, but he understood it as they were cheppering me. They were just busting my chops, yeah? Amalei, no. My amrulach, what did they say to you? It doesn't make sense. He's achi v'achi amrulach. He told them over the bracha, which I find very interesting. He obviously quoted it word for word. Otherwise, the next line of the Gemara makes no sense. Which means, to me, it means that if someone insults you, I think people remember the insult significantly more than they remember the compliments. Because I don't know if the bracha, if they would have given a regular bracha, you think he could have repeated every word for word what the bracha was? I mean, hey, he gave you a bracha. I mean, if you asked me, what did my wife say before I left to go to come to shul? Have a great day. I don't know. Say have a great day. I don't know what she said. Who knows what she said? But if she would have said to me, "You look fat" or something, I would have remembered that. Like, there's no way you forget the insults, right? Not that my wife Chas Shalom should never do that, but the point is, you see clearly they remember the exact, because he thought it was a bad bracha, klala. Amalei hanach kulu birchas. No. These were great brachas. You just didn't understand them, my son. Tizra v'loy sechtzad, you shall plant and not harvest. What does it mean? You shall plant and it shouldn't be cut off. Toili banim v'loy yamusu, you shall have children and they shouldn't die. Ta'ayil v'loy tepuk means ta'ayil kalasa, you should see your sons marry their, they should ta'ayil kalasa, they should get married. V'loy limsu benach delifkain, and your sons shouldn't die, that your daughter-in-laws will have to go back to their father's homes. Mm-hmm. Tepuk v'loy tayil means toiled benasa, you should have daughters. V'lo yamusu, and they will not, their husbands guvrayu, they won't die. Will lahadra lose levasach, and now their daughters are going to come back to you. Same bracha in the opposite direction. Lichrav bescha v'leisu v'shpischa. What does it mean? Beisach ushpischa. I'm not sure. Tahai alma ushpischa. This world is called your ushpischa. Tahahi alma, and the next world is called beisa. Meaning what? We want to say that your beischa, your kever, your death shall be destroyed, meaning you should live a long life, and your ushpischa, meaning this world, shall sit, meaning what? You should have a long ushpischa, a long life, and shouldn't die, meaning you should live a very long life. So you see, the entire thing is a bracha. And how do I know that that kever and bias are the same? The pasuk says kirbam basemoy or batemoy la'olam, and you see it says kirbam al tikri kirbam ela kvaram. So kvaram batemoy or lashon abayis is a kever. Fine. What was the connection with the next thing in the bracha? Levalvel psurcha, to give chaos on your table. That means bibnei ubnasa. It means with children and grandchildren. You should have the tables looks like all rickety and the chairs are all knots and there's so much noise you can't hear yourself think because everyone's doing their parsha sheets. That's what it means. But he gave me a bracha that I shouldn't see another year. What did it mean? That your wife shouldn't die, and therefore what would you have to do? Intisa achriti, you won't have to marry another woman and have to go through the entire concept of Shana Rishayna again. Meaning, the bracha I give you is that the Shana Rishona you had will be the last Shana Rishona you have. So you see that really, now, the question is, okay, fine, wonderful. So Rishon Bar Yochai understood the bracha, his son did not. But why did these Tanoim give the bracha in such a way that would be easy to misinterpret? So the unfortunate speak out that these two Chashava people, these Tanoim, they understood that you want a real bracha. The real bracha is if I could somehow figure out a way to give you a bracha twice. I'm giving you the bracha now. Maybe in the moment you don't realize what the bracha is, but when you get home and your father explains it to you, he's going to give you a bracha too, because he's going to have to explain it. So it's going to come out that not only are you going to get the bracha from him, but you're going to get the bracha from us as well. So that's what their intent was, which gives a new appreciation for what we mean when we say that these when he said about these two men that they were like a Gav Rabba, you see how intelligent they were that they understood. Rishon ben Chalafta, if they're Minei de Rav, a similar story. Rishon ben Chalafta left from Rav. Amr Lei, and here they changed the gear. So Amr Lei Lebre, and he said to his son, Zil legabe de levarchuch, go follow him and get a bracha from him. Amr Lei Yehi Rava de leitivayesh v'lo tizbayesh. You shall have a bracha that you shall not embarrass others, and you shall not be embarrassed by others. Asa gabe avu, and when he came back to his father, Amr Lei, my Amr Lach, what did he tell you? He says Amr Milin ba'almud Amr Lei. He was just telling me, platitudes. Amr Lei. Bracha brichta, he gave you a tremendous bracha because this is the same bracha the berachim kuchabrichul Yisrael of that you shouldn't be embarrassed. V'tanaba, and he repeated it twice. This is what Hashem did for us. The pasuk says, "Ve'achaltem achol v'savoa v'hilaltem v'lo yeshu ami la'olam." That's the first one. Yadatim ki b'ker Yisrael ani v'chulu v'lo yevoshu ami la'olam. So you see, the bracha that Hashem gave us was that we shouldn't be embarrassed. Fine. We'll just go a little weiter here. It says in the Mishnah that a woman is allowed to put on makeup, get he dressed up the pits for Chalamayit on Yantiv. The following are the makeup type things that women would do to make themselves look pretty. Kecheles, which I think is eyeshadow, like a blue thing around the eyes. Kecheles, I lost the spot here. Poikeses means they would part their hair or they would comb their hair in such a way that it would braid their hair, whatever it is. Although it can't be braiding, I think it's a discussion. How can it be braiding on Chalamayit, on Yantiv? Maybe it's a problem of being of weaving or whatever, braiding on Shabbos. Avira sarak al panel, using blush on her face. And again, all of these things could very well be malachis, meaning there's malachis of either it's a tircha is a problem of chalamayid, or it's a malacha itself is a problem of chalamayid. The ikad amri ma'averes sakin al panel shalmata, it's referring to her cleaning up oisamakam in order to make it not be so wild. So this would be another thing she would do. The base of the Rav Chizda, there's a funny story. The base of the Rav Chizda, the wife of Rav Chizda, Mekashta ba'anpe kalosa, she would be putting on her makeup, and the simple read is in front of her daughter-in-law. But the point is that she would be putting it in front of her daughter-in-law, meaning that she was old enough to have a daughter-in-law. Now that to me does not sound that old. Meaning I have a 16-year-old daughter, and 5 years from now, my wife will be having a daughter-in-law, and my wife will be, I promise you, putting on makeup in 5 years. Even though she doesn't put on a lot, but whatever she puts on, she puts on. So the Gemara seems to be implying that Rav Chizda's wife was old, right? And the point is she's putting makeup on even though she's putting it on so many years later after she's already had a daughter-in-law. Maybe
they didn't live as long and they aged a lot.
Because they didn't have all of the things we had. They didn't have fluoride in their water. Their teeth might have looked whatever. They had skin cracked, whatever. They're putting on the mud on their face to get rid of the hair, whatever it is. The point is she was old, and yet she was still putting on makeup on Chalamayit. Meaning, and again, we saw in the Mishnah, the reason why it was because it was a simcha. So Moshe says, Yosef Rav Huna bar Chinana, Kameh de Rav Chizda. There's a Peladik story if you just think about what's happening here. Rav Huna sat down next to Rav Chizda, the Yosef Kamar, and they're learning halacha. Lo Shano, the din of our Mishnah that says the woman could put on makeup on Chalamayid is only true Eli Yalda, only for a young woman, where it's a simcha for her. She's pretty, she's young. Aval Skena Loi, Skena can't, meaning what? Meaning, and your wife, what is she doing wearing makeup on Chalamayid? Meaning your wife's an older lady. Just imagine sitting at the table. It's like, I saw your wife came in. She's wearing makeup. How do you let your wife go out with makeup? Don't you know the halach of Chalamayid? Your wife's an old hag. It can't be, right? Amalei ha'elikim. Or
What would be the argument for a young woman?
Well, the whole argument is going to be that for Simchas Yontif it's mutter. So the argument would be that if you're a young woman and it actually does something, it actually makes her look better. But if you can't, she's looking to get married, or maybe,
daughter who was married already.
No, but it's not the daughter-in-law. She was doing it in front of the daughter-in-law. The Gemara was only using that to show how old she was. Meaning, if she has a daughter-in-law, then she's an old wrinkled lady. What's she doing putting on makeup?
The old woman, every time she looks in the mirror, gets sad. So she shouldn't be putting on makeup.
Okay, you can say it like that. The Gemara says, and the answer to the Gemara is exactly what I think every one of us would have said, or what our wives would say, which is, so what does the Gemara say? So Rav Chizda says back to him, Ha'elohim, afilu imcha, even your mother, afilu ema de imcha, even your grandmother, afilu emedes al kiver, a woman who's literally about to get dropped into the ground. That's how old she is. What does it say? The Amri Inshi, meaning the halacha would be that she's allowed to put makeup on a Chalamayid, because the Amri Inshi, like, hey, Bas Shisin, a 60-year-old, is Kibas Shis, is like a 6-year-old when it comes to what? Lekol Tavla Rehota, when it comes to running after the music at a chasana. Meaning don't make any distinctions between a 6-year-old and a 60-year-old. They're all the same. You're going to say it for chasing music at a chasana, or you're going to tell me that it's in their desire to go buy the fancy cosmetics so they can put on chalamayid. A woman wants to look pretty, and whether she's 2, 10, 60, 90, 120, doesn't matter. For her, it's a simcha, and therefore, the halach is going to be that she can put makeup on chalamayid. All right, we'll pause here. It's been a long day.
Are you doing tomorrow?
I'll do it in the morning.
I'll probably do
Yeah. I mean, if I do it to the wall, I do it to the wall. I mean, it's all good.
that. I have to see if I'm in the other minute.